Hey, year 11. So now we've used the equation of the regression line to make predictions in terms of interpolation and extrapolation. But we want to look a little bit closer into what the results and what the equation actually means in terms of looking at a question. So the stuff that we're going to be doing in this exercise is more so just writing sentences in plain language, explaining what's actually happening as a result of the equation. So let's have a look at the first sentence that I've got up the top here, which is just saying what we're doing. So explaining what the y-intercept and slope of the linear regression line equation actually mean. So we would remember this is what each of our equations look like, and whatever's in this A spot here is our intercept, and whatever is in this B spot here is our slope. Now remember, this equation, that just represents a certain line. So if we look at there might be a scatter plot here. I've just drawn the axis. I haven't put any dots or anything in there. The x-axis shows the explanatory variable or independent variable, you could call it. And up here, the y-axis shows the response variable or the dependent variable. What we'll see here is you see this dot. That shows the intercept or the y-intercept, and the slope is represented, the slope's represented by this line here. You see how it's sloping upwards? Alright, but the main things you're going to have to be doing in this exercise are interpreting what the y-intercept means and interpreting what the slope means. So what I've put together here are a couple of templates that you're pretty much just going to be filling out to kind of explain what the y-intercept means in terms of the variables in the question, so the context of the question, and the same over here. We're interpreting what the slope means in the context of the question. So what you'll see here in these sentences is that all you're going to have to do to get these questions correct or to interpret the results is fill in these blue boxes here. Okay, so the sentence would start off, if we're interpreting the y-intercept, as if the explanatory variable, whatever that is, we insert it into here, is 0, we can predict that the response variable will be whatever the y-intercept is. Okay, so again, we're just filling in these three boxes. And we can do the same thing for interpreting the slope. But the sentence is slightly different, but we're doing the same thing. We're just entering whatever those variables are and whatever the slope is. Okay, so for every increase of 1 of the explanatory variable, we can predict that the response variable will increase by whatever the slope is. Now what you might notice with each of these sentences is it says 0 here and it says 1 here. This will never change. It will always say 0, and over in this one that will always say 1. Okay, so let's use both of these templates to actually answer a question. So I've got an example written down here. Alright, so a regression line is used to model the association between the time in hours that a basketball player spends practicing shooting and the amount of points that he scores in a game. So we've been given the equation of the line here, and they've put the variables in there. So we have our time practicing as the x variable, which is the independent or explanatory, and we have the amount of points scored in the position of y, which is our response variable or dependent variable. Okay, so let's have a look at these questions. What is the value of the intercept? So all we need to do is look at our equation, and hopefully we can see that the intercept is 2.5. So I'm going to put that down there. Awesome. Now it says, interpret what this means in the context of the question. So this is where we have to give a sentence in plain language, actually explaining what an intercept of 2.5 means. So I'm going to quickly go back up here. This is the sentence that we're going to be using. Okay, so we need to know what the explanatory variable is, the response variable is, and what the y-intercept variable is, or what the y-intercept is, sorry. Alright, so let's start rewriting it. So if, and the explanatory variable was time spent practicing, if time spent practicing I'm just following the template, is 0, we can predict that and our response variable, so that's the amount of points scored, amount of points scored will be, and then the y-intercept, and we saw that that was 2.5. Awesome, so we've just interpreted the y-intercept, or the intercept, in plain language. So that's the sort of thing that we're going to need to do. Let's do it again, except this time it's going to be for the slope. So C asks for what's the value of the slope. We can see that the slope's value is 2.1. Alright, now it's asking us to interpret what this means in the context of the question. Let's go up to our template, which is just here. So for every increase of 1 in the explanatory variable, we can predict that the response variable will increase by whatever the slope is. So let's just fill in these 3 spots there. Alright, so for every increase of 1, and the explanatory variable was hours spent shooting, practicing shooting, we can predict that the response variable, which was the amount of points scored, will be, that will increase by whatever the slope is, so 2.1. Awesome. So we're done. We've interpreted those 2 things. Now, it might be helpful for you to use these templates, but you don't necessarily have to. If you want to say it in like a differently structured sentence, that's fine, but it has to make sure it explains the same sort of thing. Okay. Thanks, guys. Hopefully that helps. If you have any questions, let me know.